So hi, I'm Sarah Fox. I'm a postdoctoral scholar at the University of California, San Diego, and I am in the Department of Communication there, as well as the Design Lab. So the work I'm going to present today was done in collaboration with Kiley, Sobel, and Daniela, Rosner, both of whom are from the University of Washington's Department of Human-Centered Design and Engineering. And they unfortunately could not make it today, but they are here in spirit. So over the course of this talk, I will argue that the Internet of Things, or networked objects imbued with computational capacity, the subject of this session, are newly shaping public restrooms. So the changes that are brought about by IoT are set to have meaningful and long-lasting effects on labor within and around these sites, as well as on how members of the public are able to access hygiene resources. So public restrooms comprise sites of crucial infrastructure and coordinated facilities maintenance that encounter billions of people each day. But they largely remain kind of little explored within design research literatures. And while the intersection of bathrooms and IoT may at first appear kind of far from contemporary discourses of innovation that might be generally associated with Silicon Valley, such always connected devices and platforms of algorithmically mediated decision-making are increasingly prevalent across all forms of modern life. So in the study that follows, they begin to structure experiences of hygiene access. So our own kind of interest in this topic as a team is rooted in a concern for design and public life, broadly construed. And as transgender and disability activists have highlighted over the past number of decades, and even here in this conference, you cannot move throughout public space for very long without access to a restroom. So it's integral to civic life, even if it's kind of often overlooked as being central. So it's a kind of humble and complex site at the same time, I would argue. So in focusing on restrooms and forms of labor that support them, we draw on a lineage of scholarship within concerned with varied forms of accountability and studies of regulatory structures. So Suchman, Starr, Strauss, and others elaborate the circumstances surrounding different labor conditions and describe how increased visibility may also come with new forms of accountability and surveillance. So more recently, Levy and Barakis chart near-future retail technologies that ostensibly track consumer data as they move throughout retail spaces, but with the aim of actually learning about the granular processes of sales work happening on the ground for kind of extraction and automation. So drawing together these concerns across visibility, accountability, and monitoring, we seek to engage the mess, in the words of Bell and Durish, of ubiquitous computing as it unfolds on the ground. So we do this by focusing on the people who manage public restrooms as they deploy or consider deploying network technology in the spaces that they administer. In doing so, my co-authors and I offer the concept of managerial visions, or ways of seeing that structure labor, enforce compliance, and define access to resources. So with the concept, we take inspiration from the notion of professional vision from linguistic anthropologist Charles Goodwin. So Goodwin describes professional vision as a social accomplishment, offering structure to the professional world's experts inhabit and answerable to the distinctive interests of a particular social group. For example, in demonstrating the stakes of this, Goodwin examines the expert testimony of the defense in a trial of 4 police officers who were charged with the use of excessive force against Rodney King in the 1990s. He explains how the witnesses' detailed translation of a video depicting the beating, for instance, highlighting particular physical cues, helped convince jurors to acquit the defendants. And through their articulation of the video, the officers' actions read to the members of the jury as within the realm of professional practice. So they were just doing what they had been taught, essentially. Despite wide controversy over the verdict and kind of pushback from the public. So bringing this concern for vision as a social accomplishment to the pervasive but under-examined domain of public restrooms, we find the co-development of governance strategies and network technologies that extend particular codes of behavior and supervision. So this research draws from ethnographic fieldwork spanning a 3-year period from 2015 to 18, including a range of interviews and ethnographic observations with members of the facilities staff at the Seattle City Parks, where we're located, community centers, libraries, day and night shelters, as well as trade shows, and with representatives of industrial restroom product distribution firms from across the United States. And to contextualize this empirical work within wider media narratives, we complemented interviews and ethnographic material with the collection and analysis of marketing documents from these corporations, promotional videos from kind of infrastructure corporations, and additional archival resources from company archives, from museums on kind of public facilities, and so on. And we analyzed this data thematically using inductive techniques of contextualized grounded theory, which allowed us to foreground the emergent foci described in the paper on governance, moral compliance, and managerial vision. So we organized the paper according to a range of managerial visions that we encountered from the non-technological to the technological, from the local to the national, to municipal to industrial, and from current to future-oriented. And we describe how maintenance staff and building managers currently judge who deserves access to particular hygiene resources, and we explain what forms of innovation hygiene-related products, around hygiene-related products are happening now. And finally, we detail a new Internet of Things device suite, which manufacturers bill as an all-encompassing system for restroom management. So following a narrative ethnographic tradition, I'll present our findings here through vignettes as a means to kind of contextualize and represent thematic patterns that emerge within and across our data. And I'll focus here on this kind of product suite that I described briefly. The final part, essentially, of the paper, if you're to read the long form. So it's on marketing the smart washroom. And I'll close the talk by discussing the ways in which these visions may impact current forms of access and maintenance labor. So to interrogate what might become of network devices when embedded within public restrooms, I turn to broad corporate motivations for designing and installing the smart washroom and examine how managerial judgments guide its use. And to begin, I'll offer a vignette. So at the 2017 annual Cleaning Associations conference, renderings of the IoT platform Onvation were projected onto the showroom floor. IBM client manager Bob Warpinski introduced the technology, along with 2 representatives of the personal care corporation, Kimberly Clark. Kelly Eckard and Lori Schaefer were their names. So the pitch from the group focused on the potential for a networked restroom. And as you can see from the diagram above, from the marketing materials, the Onvation system the 3 were promoting is comprised of 3 core elements. First, a set of sensors that are embedded with an array of typical dispensing devices, such as faucets, paper towel rolls, toilet paper dispensers, and so on. And these sensors capture data about their environment and how they're being used by restroom patrons, and then that information is automatically sent to a cloud-based repository. It then populates 2 versions of a web and mobile platform, one for managers, which surfaces a whole host of information, for example, traffic patterns that are pulled from door counters, toilet paper usage, and so on. The other, less granular version, for custodial staff members, is meant to direct their attention to immediate requests for service. So if you look to the top right corner of this diagram, you can see that the cleaner, or the janitorial professional, is being notified that they need to fill the toilet paper dispenser in the restroom on the 3rd floor. So the IBM Kimberly-Clark team argued that 2 key issues faced building managers today. 1, shrinking facilities budgets, and 2, patrons' complaints on restroom cleanliness and upkeep. So these 2 dueling concerns put more stress on managers to optimize the material and labor available to them. So according to Eckhart, maintenance procedures that have been in effect for the last 100 years are simply insufficient for these modern demands. She further explained that Kimberly-Clark had adopted what might sound like a user-centered design approach, where they interviewed stakeholders about their pain points, defining each of these problems into solvable chunks, and designed for optimal customer experience. So the system would use network dispensers and drawer counters to collate product-oriented information with information about visits to the restroom to produce actionable data, analytics, and insights that could help building managers better manage their businesses by, quote, gaining control of the restroom. So the company promised that monitoring enabled by the system would, as this image above reinforces, cut costs, reduce waste, boost sustainability, optimize labor, and enhance tenant satisfaction. So let's zoom in on one of those aspects for a little bit, optimizing labor. So in the pitch, Onvation offers automated software that could assign individual workers their schedules based on analysis of this always-on tracking data, essentially folding in aspects of the gig economy into this traditional work environment. So while this innovation might seem to speak to concerns raised by Schaefer and other Onvation advocates on efficiency or cost reduction, numerous historical and contemporary examples have proven this practice to be one that is harsh for the worker, so the custodian or maintenance worker in this case. So it is essentially a form of responsive or dynamic scheduling that creates an erratic working condition where hours can shift dramatically from week to week, where one might receive their schedule with just a few days' notice and have little room to arrange for childcare, for example. The system might also send workers home early when it seemed there was a lull in restroom usage. So this is not a matter of kind of taking paid time off, that they simply would not be paid if they were asked to leave. So it produces a situation in which people have a difficult time determining how much they might get paid in a particular month. So this is a practice that has come under recent scrutiny within the United States as employees of Starbucks and other prominent American chains detail the effects of such policies on their daily lives. And recent legal protections have actually been put in place as a response. So in places like Philadelphia, Seattle, San Jose, and in the entire state of Oregon. But to Schaefer and the rest of the Kimberly-Clark team, instead of promoting uncertainty, the new scheduling approach makes custodians feel, quote, empowered. So having an iPad dashboard on hand or installing sensors within the dispensers they maintain makes them feel more like a service technician. So where custodians might have been little valued within contemporary culture, proximate technology offers them prestige. But Onvation does not produce entirely new working conditions, where perhaps those whose work is currently undervalued might be offered resources or newly supported through systems that might estimate their hours or monitor the predictability of shifts, kind of inverting the current system. But rather, it introduces systems in which particular forms of worker effort can be tracked and reviewed by company representatives in new ways. So this is all the more concerning if we consider how these systems are set up essentially to disproportionately monitor women and immigrants who represent larger proportions of the custodial workforce over the last several decades since deunionization. So you can kind of see this emphasis on managerial vision clearly in the promotional image above, where there's an advertisement that essentially says that Onvation creates an opportunity for the manager to re-see the city in terms of its resource allocation and what it might mean for organizational budget. So there's one, it might be difficult to see, but there's one building that simply just is labeled with ROI, or return on investment. So in IoT technology, corporations like Kimberly-Clark see an opportunity to extend an existing practice within public restrooms to seek out efficiencies and limit financial expenses by spinning the solution as a technology innovation. With terms like cut costs, boost sustainability, enhance satisfaction, they frame the outfitting of restrooms with sensing technology as a solution to a variety of problems vexing society writ large, from environmental sustainability to reduction of product and labor costs to improving customer experience. All can be addressed with innovation. So this this example points to how a managerial gaze underpins wider efforts at organizing workplace practice with network technology through monitoring the work of staff and the functionality of public facilities. So Onvocation exposes how a shift from mechanical dispensers to network devices within restrooms may introduce new hierarchies of maintenance that further the precarity of service work by making scheduled hours harder to depend on, for example. So in designing these technologies, members of engineering firms and facilities organizations work together to envision using IoT devices to capture in situ data on hygiene product usage and use data analytics software to highlight inconsistencies or aberrations. So if the level of toilet paper runs low, or if someone fails to wash their hands, for example, an alert may show up on the system's dashboard. So the resulting ways of seeing this infrastructure, what we term managerial vision, can subtly dictate where people and things move within these public spaces. So looking out from the restroom, we offer managerial visions as a concept that foregrounds the forms of labor oversight, compliance, and access structured by the way managers look on to the infrastructure that they supervise. So managerial vision organizes sites according to data captured at an increasingly granular level. As with Amazon's newly filed wristband patents, wherein haptic feedback prompts workers to take more efficient action, companies such as Workday or Humanize use smart platforms to exercise expansive amounts of control over workers in the name of industrial production. So in the case of long-haul truckers, for example, according to legal scholar and sociologist Karen Levy, these regulatory infrastructures, which in her case, were born of both corporate and governmental oversight, produce forms of decontextualized data that are used to challenge workers' own accounts of their conditions and as metrics of comparison to promote competition amongst traditionally distributed and a relatively autonomous workforce, ultimately shifting the labor dynamic of this industry at its core. So this discussion of managerial visions has sought to anchor the approaches that corporate and municipal actors take to define and contend with the perceived workplace challenges. So in this case, waste, financial cost, increased usage. They drive the placement of responsibility for sustaining public access to public resources in network devices and data analysis tools. So in this translation, network tools sharpen managers' moral sensibilities by allowing them to govern through and with such systems. So from soap dispensers to wristbands, regulatory control may hinge on an enforceable rule that associates material situation, so a lack of soap use, with disciplinary action, so improving worker cleanliness and potential kind of punitive effects as well. So although imagined as employees within the restroom context I described within this talk, visitors include anyone who might happen to stop in. So a device meant to evidence an employee compliance with hand washing requirements also belongs to the visitor off the street, which extends the gaze of the manager into one of the most private spaces available throughout the day. So the strongly held belief that more data equates to more efficient outcomes and thus produces a common good overlooks forms of oppression that might result from enforcing capitalist ideas across society. So by highlighting the consequences of this technology that disproportionately affects service workers and other subjects to this gaze, we suggest that the research community consider what it would take to combat such market pressures and the inequities that they perpetuate. So as regulating systems, IoT devices are not developed in far-off corporate meeting rooms. Instead, they intellectually and practically rely on the sorts of stories that we circulate through HCI scholarship, as well as kind of pedagogical tools. So as we collectively reflect on the sorts of public life that we would like to have and the technology that we imagine might support it, I encourage us as a discipline to consider what regulatory structures or protections for workers might we propose alongside technology interventions. How might we promote or contribute to coalitions already active in advocating change? And as a show of solidarity right here and right now, you might consider supporting rideshare drivers who are currently on strike today, seeking fairer working conditions and compensation. So rather than taking an Uber tonight to the reception or your happy hour after this, you might walk or take a bus or the ScotRail. And with that, I'd like to thank my collaborators again, Kiley, Sobel, and Daniela Rosner, members of the Feminist Labor Lab and Design Lab at UCSD, and the TAT Lab at UW, and thank you all for listening.
Any questions?
Alex Taylor, City University of London. Sarah, this is fantastic work, and I don't want my question to be seen as any criticism. I'm curious why you started with Goodwin. It feels like Goodwin's much more about how authority or professionalism gets negotiated, whereas what I see your reading of this work to be is much more a sort of Foucauldian understanding or a surveillance capitalism where power and authority is being cast through these sort of very material and digital realms. And it, in some ways I would have wanted you to start somewhere else, and I'm just curious why Goodwin?
Yeah, so the paper discusses kind of different slices where this appears. And so I think looking across collectively, the kind of vignettes show more about how it is negotiated. I was only able to kind of include one sliver of that here today, but that's a valid point. And self-governance is obviously like all through this. Yeah.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for the talk and congratulations on the award. I was wondering if you could spend a few minutes talking about how managerial visions are manifested in more public spaces rather than privately owned, office spaces and so forth. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of the field work that we did was in public spaces. And the interesting thing about the technologies as they're proposed by corporations is that their target market, kind of in their materials that they present, are office spaces, but they also make pitches to public institutions all the same. So in their vision, it is the office space, but in kind of wider deployment, it covers kind of all sorts of spaces. So when I was doing fieldwork, it included kind of the city sites like the libraries and things like this, as well as universities and so on. So it was kind of being pitched to a lot of my collaborators and interlocutors. But this is the way that it's presented kind of from a corporate imagination.
I think that's it. No.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you everyone for coming, and I think we have this session finished.